Yeah. Yeah, and I was, I was in Chinatown. I was in Chinatown. I was in what do they call it? The Triangle, in Pacific. Was it not Pacific? The Marina, the Triangle. At that time, I think one of the bars is still there, and then there was Pacific Heights. I was at Lord Jim's. Lord Jim's got raided when Feinstein was the mayor. Dianne Feinstein was the mayor, and the owner of Lord Jim's was a little Greek guy from South Africa called Spiro Temperantis, and he was picking up at least one key a month from me back then. And the SFPD came in guns blazing, and this was like a bar that a bunch of lawyers would hang out. It was a fern bar, and I had been a bartender there the year before, and all the coke that everybody was doing, but this is before crack, right? All the coke everybody was doing was mine. The other place that was like I had two places that were huge distributors of my coke. One was Lord Jim's, and the other one was the Pacific Stock Exchange, which is an options market. And I had one guy that had a seat there that he would also move at least a key a month out of there. And so that whole floor on the Pacific Stock Exchange, which is in New York, it's an options floor in San Francisco. That whole floor was high on my unadulterated pure coke, and so was Lord Jim's. That guy was moving coke, and they came in, they didn't catch anything. And there was one waitress, I heard that they handcuffed her. She had a little bit of coke residue on her little compact mirror, and they handcuffed her in front of everybody. And then I heard that Dianne Feinstein fired some, a police behind it. I don't know if she did, but it was all over worldwide news when that went down. And that was my almighty coke. There was such good coke coming out of there. I was bringing straight in from.
How much were you making in those days?
A lot. More than I ever did in the rest of my life. Actually, no, not more gross, but more net. Yeah. More net than I ever did in the rest. I made more gross afterwards, legally, but I never made more net.
What year was it?
84, 85, 86. 84, 85, 86. I started very young. I started in the 70s. But 84, 85, 86, I had a very, very strong run. Yeah, like 4 years. Had a big run.
You were getting it direct, right, from Peru?
No, I was going to Colombia.
Oh, Colombia.
Peru and Bolivia, they send the pays to Colombia, and because they're, the Indians over there are not the real business Europeans. The Colombians are the Europeans. They have a lot of Spanish descent. So they were the ones that were taking the paste, finish producing, and then handling all the shipping. And most of it was going through the Caribbean at the time. Now, of course, everything is going through Mexico. Now, like I said, it was so long, it was before crack. Crack didn't even exist back then. I got busted in Panama.
Oh, in Panama.
You talking about where I got my dope was Colombia. But I used to do the finished processing in Colombia, in a town called Bucaramanga. Bucaramanga, I got to tell you one thing. We'll put this on camera. Bucaramanga is the craziest fucking airport on the planet. You're looking down in the city of 1 million. Everybody's Indian there. You're looking down, and all of a sudden, boom, 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 boom. It's like, what the hell? It's like this city in a crater, and up on the top of the mountain, it's flat. The airport, you land right at the cliff, so you don't even see you're coming down. You're like way above I shit my pants, I swear to God. And I didn't really, but when I think about it, it was crazy. As soon as you lift off, as soon as you hit the air, it's like 3,000 feet down, because it was literally on the cliff. Bucaramanga. We used to cook it. They have a lot of coffee plantations there. We used to cook it. Prepare the paste to the cocaine hydrochloride, I think they call it, up in the mountains up there. That was a trip. That's the first time that I learned, this is kind of interesting. That was the first time that I learned moderation with cocaine. Because at that time, nobody thought cocaine was addictive. Because crack was when people said cocaine. Before that, nobody thought cocaine. If you know the history, in the 80s, people thought cocaine wasn't addictive. The only people that did coke were people that had money and an education. And so I used to see a lot of people, especially like the guy that, I can't even remember his name, the guy that had the Pacific Stock Exchange. He had the whole floor snorting my shit. Everybody was snorting back then. Nobody was smoking. And like I saw him kind of go overboard as a user, right? And then I remember going to Colombia, and I'd be up in this finca. Finca is a mountain house, and we would be cooking like 20 kilos at a time in the 55-gallon barrels. When I say cooking, it's not cooking. You're putting in the paste, and there's acetone and ether. There's two different washes, and it turns into like this milk, and then it settles down. And as it settles down, it turns into a sediment, and it binds. And then they have these big metal scoopers, and they pick it up, and then they put on these tables with these lights to dry it out. And then from there, we do the different things to get it ready for shipping, right? And like I said, in Bucaramanga, I had been there for a year every month, and I only met one pretty girl. One out of 1 million people. You understand? Out of 1 million people that I met, one pretty girl. They're not attractive Colombians. You know, if you talk about Medellin, everybody brags about how beautiful the women are. Cali, you know, Barranquilla, Cartagena, how beautiful the women are. But go to Bucaramanga. I found one pretty girl in a year there. They're not attractive. And the other thing too is, if you go to Colombia, the mix, there's 3 mixes, right? There's European Spanish, there's African slaves, and there's the indigenous Indians. In Bucaramanga, they're only indigenous Indians, okay? So, anyway, I go there, and all day long, I'm watching them cook this fucking coke, 20, 40 kilos at a time, right? And, you know, and 3 or 5 of them are mine every time, right? I go out there. And so, I'm looking at this, and I'm seeing these guys work, and I know they're getting paid peanuts, right? And at that time, they called it bazooka. These guys never snorted coke. At the end of the day, I mean, you're looking at a table like this, and the coke is like this high. So, I mean, it's like looking at, it's like half the size of a person, how much coke is on the table. They would take a little bit like this at the end of the day when they're done working. And they would, I forget what they drank. You know, most Colombians would drink Superior, which is like a anisette. But the poor drink some shit Pruno. Like they'd make their own garbage fucking Pruno. They would drink that at the end of the day, and they would take about this much of the coke that, you know, they would help themselves to. Of course, that's not a problem to take this much when you're looking at it like this much, like that much. And they would take a paper, because they couldn't buy the cigarettes in a pack. They put some tobacco on it, they do their own rollies, and they put that much on it, and then they would light it up, and they'd smoke it, and they called it bazuco. That's what they called it there. And I gotta tell you, their girlfriends and their wives were the ugliest women I've ever seen in my life, insofar as physical attractiveness, body and face. And at the end of the day, they would smoke this, and all of a sudden they'd see them look at their wives and their girlfriends like, oh, it's time to go to bed, and boom, they'd be gone. And I'd be like, that's the bazuco. Anyways, true story. Yeah.
How did you get it into this country? How you smuggle it into this country?
In the U.S., oh man, so many. I just saw in the news the other day, they busted in Malaysia, somewhere where they had toothpaste. They had 160 toothpaste full of coke. That's one of 20 ways I used to bring it in. Yeah. There's some that takes too long. I have so many stories, man. There's no such thing as the best. When you land it, it's the best. Once you land it and it's clear, There's no such thing as best. It's cleared or not cleared. So they all work. If it clears, it works. But you know, the one of the more expensive, but you had to have a lot of volume, was private planes. So what they had back then is that they would do like a co-op, but you'd need at least 20 kilos for it to be cost effective, and I don't even think they would take less than that. And so I never got to that point. The most I got to where I was bringing at a time would be, I would say 6 a month. 6 a month from there myself, but I would move other people's. But what they would do with they would package their bricks up, they would put their names or their marks on it, and then they would bring it to a plane, and then the plane would deliver it. But still, it wasn't insured. There's no insurance. They still would sometimes, but those would come in quantities, and they would separate them. You know, they would separate everybody's back then. And I have no idea what happened since the 90s and 2000s, because I haven't been in that business since 1986. That was when I got out and I went into, you know, the next chapter. So it's totally different.
Here it is. You see this? Yeah. I won my battle. I finished battle in my shadow. Yeah. I shot my arrow. It's time to think it over. I had to. Yeah. I touched that ladder. It didn't really fucking like matter. Yeah. I watched them gather. Yeah. Cause 92 is when it all shattered. Yeah. Born and bred, BK. One door, get paid. Move work, catch phase. What more can I say? Be first in battle. Trust me, life matters. Raised up, no father, more like a Chinatown guy. Go shadow.